Jesus did a lot of things that were rather nonconformist. We don't think of him that way. We think of him as a kind of a pious man who did the right thing all the time. But in terms of his own day, he was a pretty radical. He was a faithful Jew. He would regularly go to synagogue and go to temple as he was supposed to, but he didn't keep all the traditions. He didn't conform to the society's norms even. And a lot of examples of that in the scriptures. The Pharisees were scandalized that he ate with publicans and sinners. Now, eating was not a matter of simply ingesting food. Eating was an intimate family act and experience in Israel. And to eat with somebody was to kind of have a bond of friendship with them. And Jesus freely ate with sinners, public sinners, traitors. He would talk with women, unaccompanied women, loose women. Apostles got scandalized by that. What are you doing talking to her? Why are you here? You know, and what are you going? What? They were totally dumbfounded by it. And then Jesus' followers, they didn't always keep the Sabbath law. They took grain on the fields as they went and put it in their hands and kind of worked with it and ate it, and Pharisees didn't like that. And in today's scripture, Jesus goes to pagan territory. He leaves the people of Israel altogether and goes into the area of Tyre and Sidon. Now that's like us taking a little tour of Syria. Because the Canaanites, this Canaanite woman, the Canaanites were confirmed enemies of Israel. They were the group that would like to see Israel eliminated. And here's this Canaanite woman comes up and worships him, asks a favor of him. And he uses the phraseology that was what the people of Israel would use. The Canaanites were dogs. But she doesn't accept that. She even turns that on his head and comes back at him and says, "No, all right, dogs are okay. They get some scraps, they get some leftovers, so don't be so negative." And Jesus said, "Okay, great is your faith." So he healed a centurion, a Roman centurion, a pagan son. He healed this woman's daughter. He preached the gospel to the woman at the well in Samaria. All foreigners, all pagans, all enemies of Israel. It's one of the reasons that the Pharisees were so negative on him, that he didn't pay any attention to the boundaries that you're supposed to be respectable in this community. In the last couple of weeks, we've faced an incredible display of racial divisions, prejudices, made most poignant in Charlottesville, but available through many places in this country. And the ugly head of racism that has been with us from the foundation of this country asserts its subtle presence in a more opaque, less opaque way, and a much more demanding way that we pay attention to it. Now, we as Christians know that there's one word for racism, and that's called sin. It is a sin, and the attitudes that go with it are sinful. And it's more than just racism. It's prejudice of various kinds. It's the whole range of prejudice. Whenever we find ourselves talking about groups and dismissing them, that's prejudice. whether it's particular or ethnic prejudice or age prejudice or gender prejudice, it's prejudice. You know, the immigrants, the Mexicans, the Easterners, the old Confederacy. Now in liberal California, we may not be so worried about our governmental structures involving racism, although some of them are certainly subtly there. But we cannot dismiss others as if somehow or other the southern states are to be dismissed, or the people they're all that way. All of that is a form of prejudice, is a form of judgment, it's a form of dismissal. And none of that is okay as a Christ figure. None of that is okay as a Christian. But it's difficult. I mean, I don't think we ought to say too readily, well, I'm not, I don't have any of that. All this, all conservatives, all Democrats, all Republicans, same stuff, same prejudice, all anything. We are each individually created, loved by God. We are brothers and sisters of one another. That's the reality. Regardless of where we live or how we function or what our education is or what our class is or our ethnic background or anything else, the primary functional reality as a Christian is we are sisters and brothers, created by God, loved by God, destined for an eternity with God. And we have to learn to get rid of the prejudices that abide in our hearts. And we all have been raised with them. It's impossible to be raised in this country without them. Subtle, but real. It's like alcoholics, you know. If you live with an alcoholic long enough, you begin to become partially an alcoholic yourself, even though you may never have touched a drop of alcohol. So we live with people and countries and structures that are prejudicial. Eventually we pick up some of those signals ourselves, even though we have never personally accepted that or put into that from any conscious point of view. But subtly, we all have our prejudices. I mean, most of us, if you're old enough, we were raised with prejudices against Protestants. Prejudices against Jews. How about prejudice for today? So we have to ask God for healing. Ask God for healing of our prejudices, healing for our sense of things that cause division, healings for those things that create barriers between us and among us, both in terms of institutional realities in our country and in our government, in our rules, but also in our own hearts. The prejudices that abide within our own hearts. We need to become aware of that with God's help, and healed of that with God's help, that we might truly be the sisters and brothers God has created us to be. There was an old song years ago that I found very helpful, and the last lines of it were, "Who serves my Father as Son is surely kin to me." Those who seek God, those who seek to do the right thing, they're my sisters and brothers, they're my kin. Sinners are my kin. Syrophoenician women are my kin. Women are my kin. Let us be able to see each other with God's help as we are.